Good morning, Jim.
Good morning, Jay.
All right, Jim, so let's touch on the Twins who got beat by the Padres last night. Final score there was 5-3. So they fell behind 5-2 early in this game, couldn't quite catch up. Zebby Matthews got his second start. It was an error that he committed that caused some problems for them. He allowed 2 earned runs over 5 innings. Your thoughts on the Twins against the Padres last night?
Yeah, Zebby's strength is supposed to be, first of all, the Padres are really hot right now. They're playing a really good team on the road, and they faced one of their better pitchers last night. Zebby's strength is command, throwing strikes and effective strikes. So in the bad inning they had last night, the beginning that cost him the game, he walked 2 and he made an error. So three unusual and bad things all happened preceding a base clearing double. That was kind of the game, frankly. The Twins only had 1 extra base hit. They didn't produce the way they've generally been producing offensively against a very good pitcher and a very good team. And Zebby's mistakes, just cost them. The good thing is he still looked like a professional pitcher. He just walked people that he usually doesn't walk. So it's not really a red flag game. Just they didn't play well enough to beat a good team.
Did Zebby come out of nowhere to be a guy that could play in the major leagues this year?
Yeah. He was an 8th round draft pick who just flew through the organization this year. He was, listen, when the Twins hope to find this kind of player, the general draft strategy has been take the best position players available early in the draft and try to find pitchers they think are under appreciated or haven't been developed properly. And Zebby's been that guy, a strike thrower with a variety of pitches who has a lot of composure. He didn't really do anything last night to make you think he's not going to be a good major league pitcher at some point. He just made a couple mistakes.
Jim, when Derek Falvey, Thad Levine were brought in, I know Falvey came from the Cleveland organization, and they were known for developing pitching. Was he a part of that, and is that something that they still feel like they're really good at? Well,
he was, but there's kind of this misconception that the Indians drafted and developed all their best pitchers. They traded for all the best pitchers. So it doesn't really matter how you get a pitcher. And I don't know why it's a nice direct thing. If you draft your own pitcher, develop your own pitcher, sure, great. But the Twins traded for Johan Santana. They traded for Francisco Liriano. They traded for I just blanked on the guy's name. But they traded for Kenta Maeda the year before he finished 3rd in the Cy Young voting, I think it was. They traded for Joe Ryan. They traded for Pablo Lopez. Traded for Yohan Duran. Do you want them to not trade for those guys and just wait for their own people to develop? It doesn't really matter how you get them. You just got to find a way. And good teams tend to use all avenues: draft, trade, low-level free agents. Of course, the Twins generally don't win bidding wars for high-end free agents, so they have to be really good at the other stuff. But the Indians the Guardians and the Twins have really taken the same approach. Make smart trades for pitchers, try to develop them, and of course, you want to draft and develop some of your own too.
There must be something they're looking for specifically. Do you know what that is? For the players that they're trying to acquire and trade?
Usually they're looking for someone who, according to the Twins' internal and the Twins have a massive analytics department, and they all kind of pitch in and they all have observations and they have their scouts involved in it too. They're generally looking for someone who they think if they change their pitch sequence or change their grip or their delivery, they're going to better maximize their talent. Pablo Lopez last year, Pablo's not having a great year this year, but last year he developed a sweeper, and it really offset his other pitches brilliantly and allowed him to be one of the better pitchers in baseball second half of last year. With Joe Ryan, they wanted to develop pitches that played off of his high fastball. And listen, it sounds arrogant. Hey, we're going to take this guy and we're going to make him better, but you have to try that, right? And they also take people from good organizations who have probably been developed well, and they just have a different opinion on what's optimal for that pitcher. So it's just looking for tweaks. And as a former baseball beat writer, I can't tell you how many times a pitcher got hot or changed the trajectory of their career, and you talk to them about it, and it was like, oh yeah, I started throwing my slider more. Oh, I changed the grip on my curveball, and it really, slowed the curveball down, made my fastball more effective. That's why baseball is such a weird sport. So many other sports are about explosiveness and raw athletic ability. Baseball, you can change your grip and change your career.
Kansas City Royals have moved into a tie with the Twins for second place in the division, 2.5 games back of the Guardians, who did not play yesterday. Your thoughts on this Royals team? Man, they are really coming on strong. They've won 5 in a row.
They're good. They have wit to build around. They have some good young hitters, including Pascal Martino. Salvi Perez is going to be a Hall of Famer. So they have anchors to build around. Then they have fairly athletic players, allows them to cover a lot of ground on the field, and they have good young pitching. Their pitching has been excellent this year. If you were going to doubt their ability to hang in, you'd wonder if some of these pitchers with a very large workload are going to be able to continue to do this. Right now, they're doing it.
When you look at the Guardians, the Twins, and the Royals, and I know a lot of things can happen certainly between now and the end of the season. When you look at how these rosters are put together, who do you think's got the best chance to make a run in the playoffs?
It really depends on, for the Royals, really depends on whether their pitchers hold up. Because they've gotten great starting pitching. If those guys get to the postseason and still have juice in their arms, they'd be a tough team to play. The Twins, I think their playoff run would probably depend on whether Pablo had rounded into the form we saw last year and could be a good game one starter. I think Ober would be very good. And then, who's your 3? Is it, is Joe Ryan capable of coming back and pitching the postseason? Probably not a likelihood, right? So who's your number 3? And is that number 3 going to give you a chance to win? And then Cleveland, I think they're playing over their heads, but if they play, maybe they're just going to play over their heads all year. You're allowed to do that. I don't know that Cleveland would be a great postseason team, but we also don't know. Nobody picked the Rangers and the Diamondbacks to go to the World Series last year.
Jim, I wanted to bring up, Miami Dolphins quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, who opened his career playing with Brian Flores, who is the defensive coordinator for the Vikings. He made some comments on the Dan Le Batard show yesterday, talking about how, pretty much to summarize, saying that Flores did not give him confidence. He did not feel like a good quarterback there, and he spent the last couple of years working with Mike McDaniel, who has made him feel like a good quarterback. Any thoughts on it? Was it just the coach and the quarterback didn't mesh well together? What are your thoughts on that?
I do think it's not the first time I've heard that Brian was a pretty, hard guy in that organization. And really, sometimes you see that with defensive coaches. You saw Zimmer, didn't get along with Kirk Cousins. Zimmer wanted to cut Daniel Carlson after one bad game. Defensive coaches tend to be more old school, more demanding, and less empathetic to offensive players who aren't performing. So I think that strikes me as true and consistent with other things I've heard. So a number of things can be true here. Flores could not have handled Tua the way Tua wanted to be handled. Flores might have thought he was doing the right thing, and that if you're not tough enough to handle some tough coaching from your coach, you're really going to be able to pull off a fourth quarter drive with people hitting you in the face. Tua also might have played better under Mike McDaniel, which made it easier for McDaniel. I do think McDaniel and Flores are complete opposites, and almost in a stereotypical way. McDaniel's the offensive guy who wants to pat you on the back. Flores is the defensive guy who wants you to perform now. So everything Tua said, I think, sounds true. And it was also Flores' first time as a head coach, and maybe he regrets it. Maybe he'd do it differently a second time around. I think it's also true that Vikings defensive players and Vikings players in general really like Flores and like working with him and think he's a really sharp guy.
Do you think Flores is one of those guys that might be better off as a defensive coordinator than a head coach?
Maybe. There are a lot of coaches like that. But he also might be better as a head coach the second time around, having learned some things from his Miami experience and from being around the Vikings, where they do treat people really well and they do try to build people up.
Vikings made a couple of roster moves yesterday, Jim. They bring in receiver Justin Hall, and they waived punter Seth Vernon and Ty James, who was a wideout. Of course, they added Stephon Gilmore, who we knew that they're bringing him in at cornerback. Your thoughts on Justin Hall? Is he an organizational depth guy? Yeah,
it's probably worth taking. It's that time of the year where you kind of just taken a look at people. I actually don't think he can make the team if everybody's healthy. I think they're probably going to go with 5 receivers. You're probably looking at, JJ, Addison, Naylor, Powell, and Jackson. I think that's the 5 that's going to make it. But, when you bring somebody in like this, sometimes it's just a good tryout. Then you have an injury later, and maybe you can put them on your practice squad. Or maybe later in the year, if you have a wide receiver injury, you've already had this guy in, you've taken a look at him, and you know whether you want him or not.
You brought up Tristan Jackson. Boy, he has looked good in the preseason. Is it that he looks good, or is it the competition he's going up against?
It's both. I think, you can't let preseason games fool you, but when preseason games confirm what you're seeing in camp and what the team already thinks of somebody, then it just bolsters that opinion. Jackson has played really well in camp. He's a good player. He has body control. He has good hands. No, he's not going. I don't think he's going up against many number 1 corners. But I think what you see is consistent with what people think of him, which is he's a good young receiver who has some upside.
A couple of weeks ago, you and I were talking about TJ Hawkinson, and you were mentioning how he's moving around pretty well. Any update on where he's at and how quickly he could be back with the team this year?
I'm not hearing that he's likely to be ready for week 1. By the way, and I was telling you about that, there used to be a rule that if somebody starts on the PUP list or whatever, they can't play for 6 weeks. They've actually changed their injury rules, so it's really not that big a decision. They can start with him on injured reserve, and they just activate him whenever he's ready. So there's no big decision looming there. My information on that rule was outdated. So I think they'll just take it week by week and hope he's back, I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 weeks into the season.
As far as picking up the receiving portion of the tight end responsibilities, is that Johnny Muntz? Is it going to be Oliver, combination?
I really think that with Hawkinson not in there, you'll just see kind of old school tight end usage. They'll catch a few passes underneath. But I don't think you're going to see anybody approach what Hawkinson does in the passing game. I also think with Hawkinson out, Darnold is your starter. And I think you're going to see them really try to run the ball, which could mean a lot of playing time for Josh Oliver, who's a very good run blocker.
Jim, is Aaron Jones going to see somewhere between like 15 and 20 touches a game, or do they have an idea of what they want to use him as far as usage goes?
Yeah, I think when he's healthy, 15 to 20 makes a lot of sense. With Ty Chandler, I think it'll be like a 60-40 split, Aaron Jones and Ty Chandler. And they might have some special lead plays for Wongwu, be so explosive. That sounds about right.
All right, Jim, what do you got in your podcast?
Let's see. We still have a lot of good stuff up, including a good chin music show with Roy and Lavelle, Mike Grimm on the Gophers, Randy Shaver on high school football, John Millay on preps, Jeff Diamond on the Vikings. Everything's at Talk, and Russo and Gork, 2 different shows on hockey. Everything's at talknorth.com or on your favorite podcast app.
All right, Jim, thank you. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Great. Thanks, Jay.
It's Jim Souhan, Star Tribune sports columnist, joining us every weekday morning at this time. Follow him on Twitter at SouhanStrib. Check out his latest column in the Star Tribune or his podcast at talknorth.com. Jim, once again today, brought to you by the Green Mill in downtown St. Cloud, and today by Wimmer Opticians. Dream Getaway 80. Let's get you your first code word of the day. That first code word is FRY, F-R-Y. Type that in. You could win a vacation of a lifetime. First code word of the day is FRY, F-R-Y. News from ABC is next.